You know that off-camera flash is great, but how? How do you trigger this when it's not on top of this? Today, in the studio. Hello everyone, my name is Alex Silva and you're watching Alex Silva Photography. Today, let's talk about how we can make sure that this fires even though it's not on top of this. As I mentioned in a previous video, there are 3 ways in order for you to shoot off-camera flash. But let's focus today on one particular condition of those. We're going to use cables, optical triggers, and radios. However, we're going to send a simple firing signal to the flash. We're not going to send any sort of control. This means that the camera and the flash need to be in manual mode each. Manual. Manual. This also means that if at some point you need to make some adjustments to the flash configuration, you will need to walk up to where the flash is located, change the settings, and go back to your camera. You won't be able to do that remotely. So you're going to send only a firing signal. And let's go with the first solution. The first solution involves using this. These are called universal flash adapters. And as you can see, it only has a firing pin, one firing pin or connection pin. Anyway, this sends transfer a simple signal that only says fire with whatever settings you have to the signal, to the flash. We're going to need 2 of these. We're going to place the flash on top of one, and then we're going to place one of these on top of the camera. Then we're going to connect it with a cable. These universal adapters have 2 connectors. One is called a PC connector. I think it's terrible, I don't use it. But they also have audio jack connections. So you can use a simple audio cable that has mono jacks on each end. Then you connect one to the camera, the other to the flash, and then you press the shutter button and it flashes. And it just works. That is one way to send a simple trigger. However, it does have its own restrictions. You are constrained to the length of the cable. This particular cable is 6 meters long or 20 meters long, 20 feet long. That would be the maximum distance. Of course, it's not quite that. You need to consider the space for the light stand or things like that. So you're constrained to a shorter distance, let's say 3 meters or 10 feet. And that may work well. That may work fantastic if you're shooting a portrait of one person or you're shooting just one object. And it just works. And you can, based on the location of the flash, you can control the shadows and the texture of the image. So that works great. If you need a longer distance, well, you need a longer cable. It's as simple as that. However, the electrical signal will have a limit. I think the longest cable that you may have using this kind of cable is around 20 meters, something like that. I'm not super sure, but in essence, you still need to deal with cables. And even though it's very reliable, it's also a bit cumbersome. You need to make sure that nobody trips with the cables and things like that. So keep an eye on that. There's another way to there's a way to avoid all that, and it is to use an optical trigger and this is dependent on the flash model. But this particular flash has a mode to operate called servo mode. And in this particular case, the flash has this sensor which will wait for another flash to fire, and then this will fire. You can simply use your camera's built-in flash and you can just use it to trigger. However, if the flash cannot see the triggering flash, it may not work. In this particular case, it saw the reflection, so it worked, but it may not work. This is super cheap and it uses only what you currently have. And if your flashes have this servo mode, it just works. There is another way that I really like, and that is using radio triggers. We're going to use radio triggers like this. You saw me unboxing actually the receivers for the Radio Popper Nano. The Radio Popper Nano is, as I mentioned earlier before, this is a simple trigger. It only transfers a firing signal from the transmitter, which goes on top of the camera, to the receiver, which will be the base for the flash. This also works in manual mode. We need to get this back to manual mode. And then, no matter where this is, it will fire. Okay? And no matter where this is, it will just work. These are 3 ways that you can use, which are pretty reliable and you can use in order to shoot or trigger a flash that is off camera. Each one, as you saw, has advantages and disadvantages. The cable is super reliable, but you're restricted to the length of the cable and you can trip. The optical cable, the optical trigger, you don't have the risk of tripping over, but you do need light on sight. And the radio triggers are the ones that I like the most. You're not dealing with cables, you're not dealing with line of sight, and as long as you are within the radio range, it will just work. It does have a disadvantage where if many people are trying to use the same radio-based system, you may need to arrange the channels and things like that. So it does have its disadvantages. Anyway, there's another disadvantage that I'm going to mention later, that I'm going to repeat later, but these only work with the same or compatible units. For example, these radio poppers only work with radio popper triggers, do not work with any other brand of radio triggers. So the same happens with Pocket Wizards and the like. I really hope you found this video informative, helpful, and probably entertaining. If that is the case and you like the video, please press the like button. If you'd like to keep up to date with this channel, subscribe to it. Make sure that you press the bell notification symbol. And please remember to keep learning and keep shooting. See you next week.